The town of Silent Hollow slept, its streets empty and its homes dark. Nestled deep within a valley, shrouded by towering pines, it was a place untouched by time, where the days were serene and the nights peaceful. Until now. The rooster's crow, a morning ritual, never came. The silence was deafening, an eerie void where life once thrived. The sky remained a canvas of impenetrable black, devoid of stars, as if the heavens themselves had abandoned the town. The sun, the lifeblood of their world, had failed to rise. Dawn never broke, leaving the town in perpetual darkness. Fear, potent and insidious, began to seep through the town like a chilling fog, wrapping around every heart and mind. Whispers snaked through the empty streets, each shared glance filled with growing unease. Conversations were hushed and eyes darted nervously. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. The air was thick with tension and the sense of dread was palpable. As the hours ticked by and still the darkness remained unbroken, the true horror of their situation began to dawn on the inhabitants of Silent Hollow. The realization that they were trapped, not by physical barriers, but by an unnatural night that knew no end, settled in. They were prisoners of the unending night, a darkness that consumed all hope and left them in a state of perpetual fear and uncertainty. Sarah, the town doctor, watched from her window, her face etched with worry. The night had been long, and the darkness outside seemed to press against the glass, almost as if it were alive. She had seen many things in her years of practice, but nothing like this. The air was thick with an unspoken dread, and the usual sounds of the night were eerily absent. The clock ticked past noon, yet the sky remained an abyss. It was as if time itself had lost its way, trapped in an eternal twilight. The townsfolk whispered of curses and old legends, but Sarah knew there had to be a scientific explanation, even if it eluded her now. She had always been a woman of science, but this defied all rational explanation. Her instruments and tests showed nothing unusual, yet the palpable sense of foreboding was undeniable. She felt a chill run down her spine, a sensation she couldn't shake off. Across town, Father Michael, his faith shaken to its core, knelt at the altar of his deserted church. The once vibrant place of worship now felt hollow, its silence almost deafening. He clutched his rosary tightly, seeking solace in prayer, but the answers he sought remained elusive. The stained glass windows, usually ablaze with morning light, were now dark, lifeless eyes staring out into the unending night. The colors that once told stories of hope and redemption were now muted, as if the very essence of the church had been drained away. His prayers for dawn went unanswered, lost in the silence. Each passing moment felt like an eternity, and the weight of the unknown pressed heavily on his shoulders. He wondered if his faith alone would be enough to see them through this darkness. And then there was Thomas, the town recluse, who lived on the outskirts of Silent Hollow. He had always been a man of few words, but his warnings about the darkness were now impossible to ignore. The townspeople had once dismissed him as a madman, but now they weren't so sure. He had always warned of a darkness that lurked beneath the surface, a darkness that now seemed to be consuming their world. His eyes, once filled with a quiet determination, now held a glimmer of fear. He knew more than he let on, and the town was beginning to realize it. He was sure of it. This was no ordinary night. The air was thick with tension, and the shadows seemed to move with a life of their own. As the town grappled with the encroaching darkness, they knew they had to rely on each other to find a way through. The night was far from over, and the whispers in the darkness were just beginning. Days turned into nights, or rather what should have been days. The townsfolk, their faces pale and drawn, huddled together, clinging to dwindling supplies and fading hope. The once vibrant heart of Silent Hollow had grown still, the silence broken only by the sound of their own fear. Then one night a faint glow appeared on the horizon. Could it be? Was the sun finally rising? A collective gasp, a sigh of relief swept through the town, but as quickly as it had appeared, the light vanished, leaving behind a darkness more profound than before. Their hope, so briefly kindled, was extinguished, replaced by a chilling realization. This darkness was not natural. Something malevolent had taken hold of Silent Hollow, something ancient and evil. Thomas, his eyes glinting with an unsettling knowledge, emerged from his self-imposed exile. He spoke of an ancient ritual, a pact made between the town's founders and a being of immense power, a pact that had been broken. He spoke of a sacrifice, a blood offering made generations ago to appease the entity that ruled the darkness, an offering that was now long overdue. His words, though laced with madness, struck a chord of fear within them. Could this be the reason for their plight? His ramblings became their only clue, their only hope. The townsfolk, driven to desperation, gathered in the town square, their faces illuminated by flickering torches that did little to pierce the oppressive darkness. Section 5. Desperate measures. They had to try. They had to appease whatever force held their town captive. An unsettling silence descended as Father Michael, his voice trembling with a fear that belied his faith, began to recite the ancient rites. Sarah, her medical training rebelling against the primitive ceremony, found herself swept up in the collective desperation. They needed a sacrifice, a life to offer in exchange for the light. But who would be the offering? As if in answer to her unspoken question, a blood-curdling scream pierced the night. A young girl, her eyes wide with terror, stumbled into the circle of firelight, pursued by a figure shrouded in shadow. The figure stepped into the light, its features obscured by a heavy hooded cloak. A cold, unnatural wind swept through the square, extinguishing the torches and plunging them into absolute darkness. Panic seized the townsfolk. Screams filled the night, then silence. Sarah, her heart pounding in her chest, fumbled for her flashlight, its beam cutting through the darkness like a beacon. As the light settled on the figure, a gasp escaped her lips. It was Thomas. In his hand he held a sickle, its blade slick with blood. The young girl lay at his feet, her lifeblood staining the cobblestones. A triumphant smile spread across Thomas's face, a chilling, predatory grin that sent shivers down Sarah's spine. Foolish mortals, Thomas's voice, amplified by the unnatural darkness, boomed through the square. You sought to banish the darkness, to sever the pact that protected you. He laughed, a hollow, echoing sound that spoke of ancient power. I am the guardian of the pact, he continued, his voice dripping with disdain. And you have failed to uphold your end of the bargain. The darkness around him seemed to writhe, to pulse with a malevolent life of its own. Sarah, her mind racing, piecing together the fragments of local law, understood. Thomas wasn't trying to save them. He was the darkness. He had orchestrated everything, ensuring the sacrifice, feeding the entity that held Silent Hollow captive. The townsfolk, their faces pale masks of fear, could only watch as Thomas, his features contorted in a grotesque mockery of triumph, raised his arms towards the sky. The darkness above seemed to respond, swirling and churning like a boiling cauldron. Sarah knew what she had to do. She had to stop Thomas, break the cycle of fear and sacrifice that had held Silent Hollow captive for generations. But how could she fight a force that commanded the night itself? With a surge of adrenaline, Sarah grabbed a burning ember from one of the extinguished torches. The darkness recoiled from the light, offering a glimmer of hope. This was their only chance. The entity, whatever it was, feared the light. Sarah rushed towards Thomas, the burning ember held high, her scream a challenge against the suffocating darkness. Her heart pounded in her chest, each beat echoing the urgency of her mission. The night seemed endless, an abyss that threatened to swallow her whole. But she pressed on, driven by a force greater than fear. He turned to face her, a look of surprise momentarily breaking through his mask of triumph. His eyes widened, reflecting the flickering light of the ember, as if he couldn't believe she had come this far. For a moment, time stood still, the world holding its breath. The ember found its mark, striking Thomas in the chest. The impact was immediate, a burst of light in the oppressive darkness. He staggered back, clutching at the wound, his expression a mix of pain and disbelief. A horrifying shriek tore through the night as he burst into flames, his body consumed by the very darkness he had sought to control. The fire spread quickly, a ravenous beast devouring its prey, illuminating the night with its terrible beauty. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the darkness lifted. The oppressive weight that had hung over Silent Hollow for so long began to dissipate, like a fog burned away by the morning sun. The faint glow of dawn appeared on the horizon. It was a new beginning, a promise of hope and renewal. The sun had risen. Silent Hollow was free. The townspeople emerged from their homes, blinking in the light, their faces a mix of relief and disbelief. But the victory was bittersweet. Sarah stood apart, her expression a mixture of triumph and sorrow. She had won, but at what cost? Sarah knew that the darkness had not been vanquished, merely subdued. It lingered in the shadows, a constant reminder of the battle they had fought. It was a part of their town, their history. The legacy of darkness would always be a part of Silent Hollow, a shadow that could never be fully erased. And somewhere, deep within the earth, it slumbered, waiting for the pact to be broken once more. The darkness was patient, and it would rise again, as it always had.